Welcome back to the Money Script Podcast. I'm your host, Johanse Harrison. So good to be with you again on this beautiful spring day. I don't know what kind of weather y'all are having, but it's almost 80 degrees in Dallas. But I am going to talk to somebody that's in California, you know, where the sun is always shining. It's a little bit cooler, though, in Northern California, so maybe her weather's not as great as mine. I am so pleased to be with a good friend, longtime friend, and phenomenal woman, Mandela S.H. Dixon, CEO of Founder Gym. Oh, my goodness. The accolades just go on and on. We're talking 40 under 40, top 30 under 30. Founder Gym has trained the most Black women to raise over $1 million. Okay, the most Black women to raise over $1 million, and now they're launching their first new Black women cohort to train even more. Welcome, Mandela, to the show. It was just so much. I couldn't even say it all. You just have, I mean, you're always popping up into my timeline over and over again with something more wonderful that you're doing to help people raise capital. So I'm first of all, I am a little nervous because I'm excited about this conversation because I've always wanted to raise some capital myself. So just know I'm going to be feverishly taking notes. But with that, let me just be quiet and let you say hello.
Yes, well, hello. And I too am super excited to be here. You and I go way, way back through a mutual friend. So I'm excited to be a guest on your podcast and see what value I can bring to the listeners today.
Thank you. Well, let's dive right in because I want to talk about Founder Gym. I remember the launch a long time ago. And I remember looking at it like because I saw gym and I was like, wait, so did she start a gym? But then I realized, no, it's not a gym, but it is a workout. So please just tell everyone what is the Founder Gym?
Yeah, so Founder Gym is an intersection of my lived experiences. So I am the daughter of two civil rights attorneys and social justice advocates. My name is Mandela, named after Nelson Mandela. So that'll tell you everything you need to know about me. And then I also was an athlete for most of my life, from the age of 5 years old until, what was I think I was 19 or 20 when I was playing at the most elite collegiate level for women's soccer. I was the captain of NC State Division I soccer team in the ACC. And then I became a teacher in South Central Los Angeles. And after that, an entrepreneur. So Founder Gym is actually a culmination of those experiences in social justice, sports, teaching, and entrepreneurship. And what we did was we created a training program for founders and their mindset to really level them up in ways in which they cannot do on their own or via a book, right? And so we really wanted to create an environment, a virtual space for people to come together and really become championship level performers.
I love it. So now, are you talking founders, like people that want to start companies?
Yeah,
So,
definitely. Yeah. So with Founder Gym, we start with entrepreneurs who are trying to use technology to scale their businesses. So how we oftentimes describe the type of businesses that we're currently serving at Founder Gym is the difference between being an influencer on Instagram and being Instagram. Being a t-shirt vendor on Etsy or being Etsy. Right? Ooh. Being a recruiter on LinkedIn or being LinkedIn. And so what we're helping are people who want to use technology to really build platforms of scale. So these are the next unicorns, the next multi-million, billion-dollar companies. And so Founder Gym fundamentally is about redistribution of wealth, helping people who've historically been left out of this whole game called venture capital to understand what it is, how to play, and how to win at it. And so that's what we do, is we basically teach people the unwritten rules of this game. And as you mentioned in your opening, we're really proud because we have helped more underrepresented founders. So this includes women, Black founders, Latinx founders, LGBT founders, veteran founders, raise venture capital than any other program out there.
Wow. Oh, so I was the number one that I was tripping up on. That you were number one. I knew I read that somewhere. Yeah. Okay. I wrote it in my notes. It says number one online program for raising capital and scale. See, I actually wrote that down. But I was looking at the website and it was throwing me off a little bit. So now I'm just, okay. Now I'm just getting selfish. Hold on. So you said instead of selling t-shirts on Etsy, being the next Etsy. So I started thinking about the Money Script. The mission of the Money Script is to increase the financial literacy of Black and Brown and Indigenous people, because we got left out of that conversation as well. It's not taught in schools. Our parents didn't learn it because it's not taught in schools. And so a lot of us are just sent out into the world and just don't know what to do. I mean, I just yesterday talking with a client, and great job at a great Fortune 200 company, and had no idea how to fill out a W-4. He was like, I don't know. I didn't learn in high school. I didn't learn in college, but I filled it out. And apparently I filled it out wrong because I'm in trouble with the IRS. So that's part of our mission. And I've been thinking for a long time is that the way to really get it done is going to be with technology. And I've thought, instead of being, like you said, instead of being the financial planner or the financial advisory company that's on LinkedIn or that's on, you name whatever, Fidelity, you name the platform, instead just be the financial planning application itself or the educational tool itself. I might have to fill out one of those applications. We'll get into that later. So again, enough about me. So where did this all begin? How did you decide to go into entrepreneurism and then make the next decision that you want to be an entrepreneur to help other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, well, honestly, it started with an ex-boyfriend.
Okay, there we go.
It started with an ex-boyfriend who I was dating at the time when I was living in Los Angeles. Now I live in the Bay Area. And he actually participated in a business competition in college. And at the time, I was a sixth grade teacher, no longer in South Central, but in Pacoima, California. And I was entering a PhD program. And he started to get the itch to investigate his interest in business. He was an accountant at the time. He found out about this hackathon, which is kind of like a business competition. It's usually a weekend long. You come and you pitch your idea, you join a team, and you have like a weekend to build something and pitch it to judges. And so, long story short, this hackathon he found was actually focused on education. And his girlfriend, me, was the educator and also a specialist in education. And so he asked me what ideas that I had. And the idea that I came up with actually ended up winning first place.
Wow.
And that was my introduction to entrepreneurship. I had never taken a business class, a finance class, or a technology class in my life. And I was on the path to becoming a professor. And if it wasn't for who I was dating at the time and his interest in entrepreneurship, which then introduced me to entrepreneurship, I may not be here right now. So that's how I got started. And what ended up happening was I thought I was Superwoman at the time. And I was like, I could do a PhD and start a business with my boyfriend. Duh, like I could do anything.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that ended up getting the boot was my PhD program. I actually dropped out, and me and my boyfriend, who was my co-founder, went full time into building our business. And we recruited people. We ended up pitching. We eventually got venture capital from some really prestigious investors in Silicon Valley. And they required us to actually move from Los Angeles up to Silicon Valley to build our company, because at the time that was the ed tech epicenter of the world. And they wanted us to be entrenched in that network to leverage it. And so anyway, long story short, that company, 3 years in, we ended up shutting it down. Mm-hmm. One thing that people also, again, understand about the venture-backed startups is the whole model is based off of extremely fast growth. It's all about speed. So if we look at business as like an animal kingdom, the fastest animal on foot is the cheetah, right? That's startups. When you think of venture-backed startups, they are cheetahs. They are the fastest of the fast when it comes to growth. And the fuel that they use to go so fast is called venture capital. It's money from investors that allows them to hire people to build products that they otherwise couldn't afford, right, to do. And so we had played this game of venture capital as first timers who really didn't know what we were doing, went all in, and we made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I learned a lot. And so after that first business shut down, I ended up becoming a global director of entrepreneurship, scaling an organization across 6 continents. And then I ended up working in venture capital at the original venture capital firm that invested in my company. And it was there, that I really started to see how this game is played, because up to that point, I had only the vantage point of my company and what my company was trying to do. But when you work at a venture capital firm, you get to see hundreds of companies, thousands of companies pitching, and you get to see how they pitch, what they say, what they don't say, when they get the money, what do they do with the money, how do they spend it, how do they use it, right? So I just started to take notes about how many differences there were, specifically around race and gender of founders. So, and also the socioeconomic status of the founders, the background. So the white male founders, which are the most funded in Silicon Valley, who come from these Ivy Leagues, they come in here, they know how to speak VC. VC is a language, right? And Founder Gym is one of the programs that helps people learn the language so they can actually navigate this country, right, called Silicon Valley. And they would come in, they would talk the talk, they knew exactly what to say, how to say it. And then other people who don't have the same background as these founders would pitch totally differently. They would use the money differently. And it was like there were two different games being played. And time again, we saw who was winning at this game. So what I decided I could do in the position I had is I'm like, well, I know entrepreneurs. I know investors. I'm very well connected at this point in my career, and I'm also an educator. So I felt like I was well positioned to build the curriculum and the program to really kind of codify the unwritten rules of this game for a population who are so far removed from this culture so that they can actually learn it. And again, not just learn it, but win at it.
So earlier we mentioned some of the success that you've had with helping individuals raise or helping founders raise capital. And I think I saw a statistic that you've helped raise over $100 million for different founders.
Well, yeah. Well, I haven't helped. I've trained alongside some of the best investors and founders out there via our program. I've helped train up founders who've gone on to raise over $106 million in the last 3 years.
Wow.
And so again, for people who may be learning about this knowledge for the first time, one thing to understand is that less than 2% of all venture capital goes to Black founders. Less than 2%. Less than 0.2%, a fraction of 1% goes to Black women founders. So when we talk about there's a huge gap, right, in access to this capital, you have to understand if you can't get a hand on the fuel, you can never be the cheetah. Right. And so what we are trying to do, again, is help bridge this gap. So when we share the numbers that we share, it's really historic. And what we're trying to do is show people it is possible. And let me also be clear that being a venture-backed startup, being the cheetah, may not be everybody's cup of tea. I'm not here to convince people you should be a cheetah. No, if you want to be a giraffe, if you want to be an elephant, if you want to be a hippo, that's great. You can go at your own pace. That's wonderful. I strongly recommend making sure you sign up for a business that you feel good about. But if you do potentially want to build the next big billion-dollar company, you have that aspiration, right? Where can you go, right? A trusted, safe space to really be a part of a community with other people who are like you, where you can feel comfortable asking the questions you really want to ask, sharing the lived experiences you have to really build the camaraderie and the support structure you're going to need to be successful.
So how does the program work? So it's an education. So you said you melded the education background that you had with the technology, with entrepreneurism and being a cheetah. So if one were signing up to go through the curriculum, what would they expect?
Yeah. So what we really, I think, specialize in is we probably have access to some of the most experienced, successful, powerful venture capitalists and funded founders, also startup lawyers in the world. And so people who are coming to our program as the professors, as the trainers, are people who've invested in Facebook and Clubhouse and Instagram and Uber and DoorDash, right? Like they've helped build Cheetahs, right? And so they know what they're talking about. And so it's about the caliber of the trainers, I think, is one thing, is that we bring in people who've lived this, right? This isn't just theory. This is their life. And it's not just investors, but also founders. We bring in some of the most successful underrepresented founders out there. Like for our new cohort that we just launched for Black women, we have a founder on there named Phaedra, who's the founder of Promise, who just raised $21 million. Like, again, that's unheard of for a Black woman founder. And so that's one of the aspects of it. Another thing is accountability. So I don't play games, okay? And as the CEO of Founder Gym, we have a culture of like, if we are serious about success, and we will do everything in our power to create the environment for you to be successful. But once we bring you to the water, you got to drink, right? And so we actually have strong, I think, structures of accountability where we have 100% attendance requirement, 100% completion requirement. This isn't about cutting corners, right? If you really want to be successful, this is about being in an environment where you are going to be forced to level up, right? It's like no excuses here. And I would say another thing is the curriculum. So I actually personally wrote all of the curriculum, and it's been updated based off of the expert trainers who come in over 3+ years now. So that's another thing. And then also our content library. So we've had over 100 trainers come into our program. It's all recorded. The founders have a library of content that they can go deeper into certain content areas if they're interested. And then lastly, there's a graduation. So you actually must complete certain milestones in order to graduate. Right? This isn't just a check the box exercise. This is about really giving you a preview of life's coming attractions, which is real startup CEO life.
Now, if we look at the financial landscape, especially coming out of, and I say coming out of COVID because we're all coming out of it. It's happening. The end is near. Hopefully, knock on wood or cross a finger or something. But if we look at the financial landscape, there's been a massive amount of liquidity. Of money that has gone into venture capitalism, that has gone into companies going public and doing even new versions of listing that I had never even seen before, the direct listings and side-by-sides and all of these wonderful ways to create liquidity and create exit strategies for these founders. How have you seen in the last, I'd say 12 to 18 months, how have you seen the landscapes change with the minorities, especially those Black women that you mentioned, the 0.2%, with this massive amount of liquidity that's out there? Has the landscape changed?
Yeah, I think in certain ways it has, in other ways it hasn't. So like you mentioned, there's actually more venture capitalists than I've ever seen. I think more and more people are getting educated about the private investment vehicle that is venture capital, because basically what it means is before DoorDash, right, is available in the public market for people to purchase shares of, right, private investors are buying shares at a much cheaper rate. Right? Employees of those companies are getting shares, right? And they're getting re-upped on shares in order to stay incentivized to work at the company. So there's all sorts of ways that founders and investors are using the tool of equity in these private companies to create wealth for themselves. And when it comes to, I think, underrepresented founders, I mean, one of the things that I just feel like is not getting enough attention, especially in the Black community, has been Robert Refkin, the co-founder and CEO of Compass. He, to my knowledge, so I'm happy if there's a fact checker listening that wants to correct me, but to my knowledge, he is the first Black tech startup CEO to take a company public. That just happened last week. That just happened last week. So it's happening. The first one just happened. And so what I would say is I see evidence every day that the next Black unicorn is coming. And in Silicon Valley, we call them unicorns, the ones who have $1 billion valuation, right? This is like Facebook level type of stuff. And it just happened. I think with women founders, as I shared that stat with you before, women founders still, whether it's white women, Asian women, Indian women, Black women, they are still underfunded compared to their male counterparts. And then if you slice it by race, like Black or Latinx, even more so. But like I mentioned, Black women are the least funded of all. And so what's happening is that I think because of people who have created wealth for themselves, either as investors or as early employees of other companies that have had a successful exit. So I have several friends who worked at Airbnb. Airbnb had IPO'd at the end of last year, Q4. Several of those friends, they are now fund employed, which means they're retired. They're my age. I'm 35, right? So before coming to this world, I never knew that you could create so much wealth in a 10-year time span that you could retire, right? Like that is the power if it works, right? And so these people, right? Some of my friends are Black. They are by and large the wealthiest people in their families now. But you know what some of them are becoming? Some of them are becoming venture capitalists or angel investors where they can invest their own capital. So what's happening is that the more Black, brown, women, underrepresented groups there are on the investment side, there is a strong correlation to more capital being deployed to underrepresented founders, right? So again, what that means is women investors invest in women founders. Black investors invest in Black founders. Latinx investors invest in Latinx founders because there's a mutual rapport there. There's a trust there. There's an understanding of the problems they're solving, the community they're solving for. And so one of the things that's shifting is that the investors are shifting, not nearly at the rate. 9 out of 10 investors are still white men for venture capitalists. But there is more coming up than I've ever seen before in terms of who are not white men and who are deploying their capital across a more diverse spectrum of founders.
Okay, side note, we get to have a separate conversation because you were describing a lot of my clients. Most of my clients are women, and some of them work in Silicon Valley and have become what I like to call instant 100,000-aires and instant millionaires from company stock. And some of them have values and inspirations of reinvesting into their own communities and don't quite know how. And because I've been a traditional financial planner, I don't quite know how either. I'm familiar with companies like Seed Invest, and there was another one, I can't think of the name of it right now, where you could go and get access to startup companies and venture capital. But it sounds like you might have some other places that I could take some of these individuals, or even maybe even create some sort of workshop for these individuals where we can teach them how to connect with these VC organizations and fund more companies that look like them, or founders that look like them.
For sure. I would say there's two ways that you can, and again, there is a threshold to becoming an angel investor.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I believe it is it 200,000 in an annual salary across 2 years minimum, or a $1 million net worth.
You
and that can
said
include
it.
your
You said it exactly. That is the definition of an accredited investor. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so there are many emerging and already established angel groups, and sharing the deal flow and being able to get on the cap tables is an art in and of itself. And then there's also increasingly new opportunities to become an LP. And an LP is a limited partner. And that's when you are not investing in the company, but you're investing in the investment firm that invests in the companies. Mm-hmm. Right. And so again, what I have seen happen in the last year, especially since George Floyd, I have never seen more white people open up their cap tables to Black and brown people that I've ever seen before. So yes, I think white people who are on the woke spectrum are also understanding the privilege they have with deciding who gets on their cap table. And they're using that privilege to help people who historically would never have access to it, give them access.
Yes, indeed. Oh, I'm so excited. This is the timing. Our timing was perfect. By the way, you guys, we've been trying to get this podcast going for at least 6 months. It's COVID and we both got kids and all that fun stuff. But here we are. We got it. Okay. We're going to have you back for more because I have so many more questions, especially about connecting those groups. Because
We
again,
can
that's
do a
something.
part two, for
Yeah, we're
sure.
going to have to do a part two. So let's get into the question that everybody wants to know that tunes in. We're about creating money scripts here, and money scripts are the ideas and strategies that you have kind of built into your subconscious when it comes to how you think about money. And we firmly believe that these ideas and strategies were introduced to you at a very young age. So at some age, you became aware of money and you knew what money was. And there are some incidents that happened in your life, that happened in my life, and all of our lives that have kind of built that money script for us that we still carry today. So with that, please share with us, what is your first memory of money?
My first memory of money. I think that when I think of money in childhood, so I don't know if this was my exact first one, but what comes up for me when I think of money in my childhood, I think of trauma. I think of arguments. I think of stress and strain, embarrassment, hurt, pain. There was a period of time when my family was bankrupt. And I remember, I don't know if I was involved in the conversation or overheard it, but my parents, it became aware to me that my mother's wages were being garnished by the government, right? And I remember always going to thrift stores, always buying all of our clothes mostly secondhand, all of our furniture secondhand, definitely all of our cars secondhand. They would break down all the time. I remember being embarrassed and trying to ask my dad drop me off a few blocks away from school so nobody has to see me get out of this. I just remember a lot of pain from arguments between my family about money and the lack of it. And I also remember embarrassment because one of the things, and I don't know if I've ever really talked about this, but one of the things I remember is I've always gone to public school. I always grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, but it was diverse as well. There were other races in there, but I was an elite athlete. And so were my other sisters. So we were in these like suburban club leagues and we would travel to tournaments. And like even when I was a teenager, I was in the Olympic development program. And so I would be a part of all these organizations on scholarship. And I remember kind of living in two different worlds, like my world, and then I'd go to this more affluent world where the parents were picking us up in these huge Suburbans and they were all dressed nice and going these places. And I remember in that, like having a little bit of spending money and being so conscientious of how I spent it and trying to hide my like embarrassment or my lack of knowledge about like how to eat at nice restaurants and stuff. So I do believe there was a lot of trauma there that stayed with me and stuck with me through a long time. And one of the beautiful things about me launching Founder Gym is it's been my therapy. It really has. It's been my therapy in a big way because I can't help other people if I don't first help myself. I can't ask other people to go to places like in their childhood and like figure out the root causes of what their relationship is with money. Like you just asked me, unless I do that work first. And so, but yeah, that's my first memory.
So how does that, I mean, you kind of worked your way a little bit through the breakthrough of Founder Gym, but how are you working through that trauma today? Like, what do you think are some of the big aha moments that you had when you realized that, wait, I'm carrying my childhood with me. I got to let this go.
Oh my goodness. So the biggest thing was a nightmare that I had. And this was after I had already run my first venture-backed startup. I was already kind of building a brand online so that I was kind of well known, especially in the education tech space, which is where I started ed tech. And I was running that global organization before I was recruited to work at a VC firm. So that's where I was. And I remember having this dream because prior to that, so I live in the Bay Area now, but my mom at the time was still living in Los Angeles. And she received a letter at the home that I used to live with her in. It was like a summons, like a legal summons, summoning me to court for like past due payments. And I remember being so unnerved by that and being like I remember being so unnerved and so embarrassed and so ashamed that I'm an adult. Like I should be doing better. How do I have this debt that I'm not on top of, that I haven't taken care of yet? And I remember feeling all these emotions to the point I had a nightmare about it. And you know what the nightmare was, is that I was on stage being Mandela, being, the speaker, featured speaker. And afterwards, like it happens after every time I get off stage, and there's a line of people who want to talk to me and ask me questions. And I'm going through the line, right? And I'm doing my thing. And then whatever, the 10th person in line is a person with a manila envelope saying, "You've been served, Mandela. You're past due all your problems," in front of everybody. So for me, and I remember like waking up, like I literally remember this. I never remember my dreams. And I remember it was such a punch in the face of me living a lie. Me living one way outwardly, but behind the scenes, not having my shit together. And it was that dream where I remember I don't know if he was my husband at the time. I think maybe he was my fiance or my boyfriend. So this was a different guy, not the original guy. This was my now husband. And I remember taking him out on a porch, and we were living together at the time, and telling him about my dream. And so I got to get my fucking life together. Like I can't do this anymore. I can't have this dark cloud. Like I'm willing to do anything. And I think one of the first books he told me to read was, what's the Guy Kawasaki book, the famous one?
Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Rich
Dad, Poor Dad, and then The Millionaire Next Door, and then all the other ones you can just. So I just started educating myself. I started paying down my debts. I started looking at my credit scores, things that I was terrified to do. And it honestly is, it's because I was who I was longer than I am who I am today, it still takes a daily practice, a daily work. And, this is such a crucial thing to address, because if your personal finances are not well taken care of, or your personal habits in your financial area of your life are not well cared for, it's going to show up in your business. It will. It's not like all of a sudden when you put CEO on your LinkedIn that you're going to become a money master, but your personal money ain't there, right? It ain't happening. Like it really, you are who you are everywhere. And until you address the truth, the hard truths, the ugly parts of yourself, the sad parts, the trauma parts of yourself, it will show up. So even if you can figure out how to play the game of venture capital, you get the $2 million, at one point or another, it's going to show up, right? In terms of your lack of true awareness of how to manage money, how to grow money, how to keep money, all those steps.
Amen to that. Amen. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer. I know you've got to get back to your little one. Again, thank you so much for spending some time with us on the Money Script podcast. Please tell everyone where they can learn more about you and find out how they can apply for this new cohort.
Yeah, sure. So my company is called foundergym.com. So you can go there and find all the information about us. We just launched a brand new cohort specifically for Black women. So if you're interested in that, great. If that doesn't suit you and you may be interested in a future cohort, you can sign up there too to get notified. But where I hang out the most online, honestly, is Instagram. And so my handle is Mandela SH. You can find me over there.
Wonderful. Everybody go check her out. And please, let's do the fact check. College kids, that's your new one. Tweet me, fact check her, rewind it back, fact check, and let's find out what those stats really are. But I really appreciate you again, Mandela, for spending some time. And I do know what the biggest thing I learned was where your name came from. I did not. I mean, I knew Nelson Mandela, but I had no idea it was that intentional. So
yes, it is, whether it's boy or girl, it's going to be named Mandela. I'll pop me in. Again, another fun fact is Nelson Mandela was still very much in prison with no sight of getting out. Yep. Wow. And another fun fact is he actually came to my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania when I was 4 years old. And my dad took me down in a huge auditorium to see him. And all I remember is my dad yelling at the top of his lungs, "My daughter's named Mandela." And I was just flushed, red, embarrassed, but it's a memory.
It is. Mandela, thank you again. We'll see everyone next time on the Money Script podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Script podcast. Be sure to check out our other episodes, subscribe, follow, and give us 5 stars. Continue to send your financial questions on Twitter or Instagram at the Money Script. Go to moneyscriptwealth.com and schedule your complimentary consultation to discuss your specific goals and concerns. Financial advisory and investment management services are offered by Money Script Wealth Management PLLC, a registered investment advisory firm registered in the state of Texas and California and other states where exempt. The Money Script LLC and the Money Script Wealth Management PLLC and guests of the episode may have interest in the investments mentioned today. The opinions and views are expressed here are for informational purposes only. This material is educational in nature and should not be deemed as a solicitation for any specific product or service. All investments involve risk and a significant loss of principal. The Money Script nor Money Script Wealth Management offer tax or legal advice. Please consult your tax advisor or attorney for specific advice about your situation. Until next time.